What is up, YouTube? History family, political family, or libertarian family. It is I, the Libertarian Metaverse, and yeah, this is K right here. I'm here to bring the Libertarian Metaverse to you. So, yeah, let's get right into it, man. We have another good topic in front of us today. I guess as far as this topic goes, this is a weird topic that some people really be playing in political discussions, but were black people the native ancestors of American Indian genes? And the short answer to this is no, and I'll just break it down as it is with American Indian DNA and explain why black people need to stop coexisting with American Indian DNA. To think Africans had a root in creating the American Indian DNA ancestry, I guess, or the Aboriginal ancestry, which Aboriginal and American Indians are two different things. Aboriginal, that's more concurrent with like the Polynesian or somewhat, African-ish immigration of tribal ancestry of what people practice over in the oceanic lands of Australia and New Zealand. Well, I don't think New Zealand was a thing. I think New Zealand was more like Polynesian with with the Maori tribe and all those other savage-like tribes and what people believed in. Like, I don't call them purely savage, but for the most part, they were very, wild, barbaric people that believed in not so peaceful things, depending on what people believed in. In terms of what I can say about the American Indian immigration of America and everything that has been transpired to what people call indigenous of the peoples of Caribbean America, South America, Central America, North America, that was definitely heavily Asian-like immigration that was coming from the Asian roots of the people of at least, I would say, Eastern Asia to probably Western Asia, most likely, because if you think about it, Asians are very like a good portion of them have like very snow white looking skin, but those that do carry a lot of brown tannish features, those people definitely have like a really strong like Southeast Asian border like skin frame of who they are as a people. And some people really try to say that that's more concurrent with African features, but it's really not, because with Africa, most African early ancient settlers, they were very like dark skinned. They had a lot of nappy hair. American Indian features were never close to that level. And case in point, if you just look at the archaeological studies that show what American Indians looked like, they had heavy cheekbones, they had very strong facial features in terms of looking more of a very naturalized person, of like a more, Indian frame type of individual. And it's very Asian-like. I mean, granted, Asians and American Indians are two different things, because when people talk about evolution and when people talk about human DNA and the structure of the human mindset and the facial functions of a human, you can easily tell that, between the difference between humans and apes is that us humans, we have a mindset of differentiating what we can see from the outside looking in of what is considered to be identity. So as mankind grew stronger in understanding identity, it shows that those gene traits that are more heavily structured within the realms of being more, being more concurrent of what people's bloodlines are, that's what separates the whole motto of determining who is what and what is made out of what material out of the natural resources of your skin pigmentation, defines you as a human. And in any form of political identification of what we can consider black, white, Hispanic, or American Indian. Like all these terms that obviously the state creates to separate people, to make people feel divisively stagnated against one another. That's like the biggest thing that a lot of people don't want to be honest about. And like it sucks because there's plenty of people in the world that can say that they're white, but the definition of white is a very vague term, because white people can refer to white Asians, so white looking African people, not of a European sense, maybe albino Africans, maybe white Jewish people of some sort, of a Middle Eastern root or whatever. But I think when it really comes down to it, when we really think about politicizing, racial groups, people really look at the historical bloodline to be a generalization of what the people look like. And that's a really hard, massive failure of human interpretation to determine what is a proper bloodline of a certain group of people. So to make it a little bit more simpler with the American Indians, I'm not going to go into a massive discussion, about them. But when you look at all the tribes that are now concurrent in American studies of the historical bloodlines of American Indians, you can clearly tell that most of them look very, very Asian-like people, or they look very, how should I say, they look very Polynesian type of an Asian root, but it's now evolved to become an American style type of, tropical, Pacific Islander or Atlantic Islander settler. And the thing about it is that when these tribes did come together, especially in the American Indian tribes, a lot of these tribes carried a lot of very Asian-like roots in what they believed in. But obviously, as they grew older, they started to branch off in their own primitive, or I would say just like very, like, how should I say, very hunter-gatherer style type of beliefs, because American Indians have similar outputs in what they believed in with Africans in the animist belief of a belief of using animals as a means of religious beliefs. But they believed in using animals and using nature as a form of believing in certain things in their own religious beliefs as a people. But like the whole deal behind it was just that when you think about it, like, not everybody believed in the same thing, but in terms of what you can interpret out of what they wanted to believe in, it was a very minute point of how you can determine how the people's traditional bloodlines and where those bloodlines rooted back to determine what type of people were considered, how should I say, I guess like a true American Indian type of culture, because culture is very subjective in the world of what we can call, I guess a politicized nation of people. But it's just that when you just take a look at how American Indians operated, a lot of them really operated in hunter-gatherer style type of traditions, where people had their own type of singing cultures, they had their own type of religious ceremonies of what they believed in, and everybody just had like a different mindset of what they believed in. In terms of racial DNA, it's not really shown that Africans really have any connection with American Indians, and a lot of these weirdos, especially on the internet, really try to say like, oh no man, Africans are very connected with the American Indian bloodline, and you could see it before and after slavery, blah blah blah, of what these people were and whatnot, and black people basically were the creators of American Indian genes, and like, yeah, just like a bunch of stupid shit that doesn't make any sense. And it clearly just shows that people just use historical revisionism to portray something that is not true, to make it seem like that it is true as a historical fact when it's clearly not. But in terms of black people being the sole proprietors of being connected with American Indian genes. No, that's not true. Black people as a African cult, or as an African DNA as a whole, had no roots to any means of American Indian bloodline in terms of where the people started, where the heritages have formed, and how these Indian chiefdoms believed in what they believed in. Because, remind you, in their form of beliefs, their beliefs were way more different compared to African beliefs, and the African beliefs were a lot more tribalistically insane. And I'm not just saying, I'm not saying that every African was just stupid and they had no means of wanting to, advance, to the modern world. But if you really think about it, like, American Indians were just not really at any form of level with, how I could say with, how should I say, like, they never had any carrying traditions from any roots of African pool gene bloodline, because as they grew older with their tribes, drifted off more to be more synthetic of their own, exclusive, beliefs of who they were as a people. And, for black people that do claim American Indian blood, which, the whole truth behind that is that when you look at these tribes that had black people in their tribes, they were enslaving these black people. Like, they weren't keeping these black people to be, a part of their tribe and culture. I mean, maybe in some certain tribes you could probably say, oh, well, the Algonquins did that in certain spectacles and certain ways of belief. And, there was proof that the Shawnee tribe had black people in America, when slaves were, trying to integrate with other people because, they were separated from their families, and they were most likely being fed to the wolves and being fed to animals, with their children getting murdered and husbands getting killed, or husbands and wives, getting killed. But still, it still doesn't prove that black people were the main ancestors of American Indian DNA. And furthermore, it's like, if they were, there would be no Indian, genetics really being shown out of who they were as a people. I think that's like the really most, retarded thing that a lot of black Americans do in terms of claiming something that they're not, because that's like saying that, like, black people created, ancient Egypt, in which, there were contributions in ancient Egypt done by black slaves, but it wasn't black people ruling the Egyptian empire. So either way, that the statements just show themselves to be very minute and very vague with very little information, because when these people really do go back and look at the history of what these tribes were, like, I'll just use the Choctaw Indian tribe, the Apache Indian tribe, in America. Like, these tribes were not, African by any means necessary. But even just to say by who they were as a people, like, they had a foundation of who they were. It's just that when you look at what they've done to other people that have tried to integrate with them, they were very savage people. I mean, like, again, not every tribe was a really crazy psychopathic mindset of people that wanted to just go out of their way and use these crazy religious, beliefs to start killing people and just basically ravage on more violence. Like, no, like, there were people out there that did believe in peace and prosperity and wanting to modernize, their people. But the problem is just that when you have people of certain, beliefs and mindsets to, believe in certain things of what they wanted, what they wanted as a people, it's just a clear indicator to show that when the DNA evidence proves that these people were not respecting the people that you think was the sole proprietors of that culture or that, ethnic bloodline, then it doesn't prove anything. But the fossil records show and the DNA evidence shows that American Indians were not even close to even being, how should I say, like black, right? But either way, even if you wanted to even try to use like the weird point of saying like, oh, well, some of them were very dark skinned and they had very African like roots, which it's not even true, because it's like, number one, by the way, like the photos that were taken back in like what the but the late I would say that the late 1700s leading into the early 1800s, when things were modernizing in America, that was like the only time where you could actually say, okay, you can think that something was black back then for an American Indian, but just to remind you, like American Indians did not have like a certain color line, like when it came to photos being operated in the ancient American, how should I say, I wouldn't even say ancient, like it was just more of the classical post-industrialized, revolutionary era, where after America was going through the colonial war, things were not really heavily industrialized enough to the point where people were able to, create whatever they wanted to do in their inventions to actually modernize, the country more. So when photography was ever to be a thing, in America, the technology was not good enough to determine, the proper colorization of what people looked like. So that's why when you looked at black people, they looked really, really dark skinned. And then in certain cases with like light skinned people, you can see that they had some light skin-ish features, but 9 times out of 10 they were still, around that pigmentation segment of being black. So I mean, either way, like it just kind of just shows like, you still had everything, like, everybody operating in some certain type of manner. But I mean, either way, it's just that people back then that were claiming to have some form of bloodline, connected, with them, that wasn't flying to anybody that was basically pointing like a gun at you, working, for the state, and, segregating and dividing people based off of, who they look like. But in terms of, how should I say, black Americans, or just, people in general trying to claim to say that Africans had, but the main DNA components to create or to be the pioneered group of people for American Indian DNA, that's not true, because the blacks that were coming to America were slaves. They had no roots of American Indian blood whatsoever. And on top of that, American Indians, they were already enslaving black people by the time when they were coming over to the States. So when people were trying to say that black people, they had all these great relationships with American Indians, that's not true. American Indians were very brutal, very savage. Not all of them. I'm not going to say all of them, but a good number of them, they had no contact with black people at all. Like how many tribes out of like what? I think it's like 5,000 or 10,000 plus tribes, in America, that, American Indians had any contact with black people. Like I don't think for 1 second to believe that they had any connection to even be friends with black people. But to even like make it even worse for black Americans to even hear this, like, you should understand that American Indians, they were already going to war with one another to basically, to basically have their own, maniacal political indifferences to be settled through massive violence, and to do the things that they thought it was okay to, how should I say, operate off of. But I think either way, it just shows that, with like American Indian, how should I say, with American Indian history being laid out of who they are as millions of people in multiple or thousands of different tribes that believed in different things and different mindsets for opportunities of who they were. It just shows that they were never friends with black slaves coming over to the States. And It's not even to be disrespectful or to even be, like, how should I say, maniacally rude to think that, I'm siding with, with a colonists and whatnot, or colonial, retardation. But the case in point is just that American Indians, they were just a status. Well, a good portion of them were status when it came to their empires and what they believed in and what they did to people in terms of what they wanted to do to people, because they were like, remind you, they were religiously divisive in terms of what they believed in and what they wanted to do for their tribe. So, like any other barbaric thinking empire, you will do things that your chieftain believes to think that is what is correct for the people, when clearly it is not a right way to govern people and tell people what to do. Versus in other tribes in American Indian history, those people wanted to decentralize. They wanted to come together in a free market type setting where everybody could have a difference of ideas and people can raise children to be strong, responsible, noble men. And that's why when you hear, some of what these terms in American Indian tribes, where they call certain men noble warriors versus from unnoble savages, those tribes divide certain people that they accept to be civil and uncivil people. Like, they had their own laws and regulations of who they were as a people. And you could easily tell with certain tribes in America that wanted to modernize and actually be better as a people. Like, when you look at the Algonquins, a lot of people try to view them to be really crazy people, but they really were not. Algonquins were very peaceful people. These people had a lot of knowledge and wanting to become farmers, wanted to advance in medicine. And you could easily tell with even women like, Sacagawea. I forgot what tribe that she belonged to, but Sacagawea, when she was working with Lewis and Clark, she was very good with navigating and understanding certain points of understanding, geographical locations, because she was very intelligent of just managing where things were going in certain directions. And obviously Lewis and Clark being idiots, because they wanted to try to take advantage of her and tell her to just shut up and just basically tell her to guide them about the way that they were going, in which it's a stupid ass story, which I'll probably bring it up in one of those videos if you guys want me to. But the whole thing about it is that American Indians, a lot of them were very smart. A good portion of them were smart. But the ones that were not smart were the ones that actually wanted to go to war, set a bad example for their people. And that's why that you see, the people that are out there today trying to basically revive, that type of mindset, to believe that, that American Indian empires need to come back and all this other, insane maniacs, status BS that doesn't help anybody but just make people want to kill each other, because that's really what what the whole mindset is. People that live in fear will end up being victims of political servitude, because the more you could fear your population to make people angry and pissed off at you, of course that's going to continue the status machine to make people want to just go back to square one, where it's just going to be constant warfare back and forth. But in terms of African DNA being the sole proprietor to American Indian DNA, that's far from a long shot, and there's no proof of even showing that American Indians had any roots of African bloodline, because a lot of the so-called Africans that want to call themselves American Indians, those American Indians would very well kill you, and they will go back and tell you that their bloodline does not root to Africa. Their bloodline is most likely rooted to Asian roots or Polynesian roots. And what I mean by Polynesian is that those are people that are mixed with multiple genes of Asian DNA, and then they later got transpired to being, Polynesian American Indian roots of its own, because now you went from Asia over to another part of the world, so therefore your roots are no longer back in Asia. Your roots are now basically Polynesian American, because that's really what American Indians would be viewed as. Because if you look at it, even with, like, how should I say, Mexicans, Nicaraguans, Venezuelans, a lot of these brown looking people, a lot of these people carry a lot of, American Indian bloodline, versus from some other people that definitely look white or mixed breed for being quote unquote Hispanics, right? Even if you take a look at certain tribes, in America called the Navajo, the Pueblo Indians, like a lot of these tribes, very, 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 very Indian-like people. They don't carry really any African roots per se, because what they try to say is like they have African blood in certain family bloodlines, but that's really not by that much, because these are people that have transpired from slavery. Because if they were really people from Africa that came over to the, like, Americas by some form of boat, where black people were coming in as, freed people, which, but the people that were freed were most likely slave owners, because Black America was like the second pioneer to slavery, next to American Indians, where American Indians were like the massive, slave owners in America, because they basically prioritized slavery a lot. And they were doing some really evil shit, you know what I'm saying? Like, it wasn't funny. Like, this is putting people's lives at risk. And there's like a reason why people don't want to talk about that, because they try to act like American Indians were kind to one another, but no, they really weren't. A massive portion of them were very, how should I say, a massive portion of them believed in really bad things to continue the political regime of dividing one another. Yeah, dividing one another. So if it meant, for the sake of like American Indians to do what they wanted to do in terms of what they believed in was to be correct in their form of status, thinking, of course, that's what people wanted to do. But I mean, in terms of like black people holding this ownership of them having American Indian bloodline, it's just not true. Because if it was true, then, black Africans would be claiming American Indian right now if they already had it in their bloodline. But, it's only, the weird black Americans that will claim that to be, a factual thing when it's clearly not. And by the way, if American Indians were enslaving, black people, once they came into the States as slaves, then why were those American Indians not freeing those black people at the same time? Because if you're enslaving your own black brotherhood, shouldn't you have other black people stand up for you, i.e. the American Indians, to say, oh, well, we're here to save our black brothers, blah, blah, blah. No, that's not true. So obviously let the whole mindset clearly shows, like, people that want to talk in political revisionism to think that they're some smart ass, they're not smart. And I mean, to all you black Americans that don't do like your research to think that black people were not enslaved by, American Indians, just go fucking look it up. Because even for myself, like, I'm a black American man, talking, but, the thing about, American Indians, having a relationship with black people, and people think like that, they had like such a kind root with getting along with them. No, that's not true. Like, I got Choctaw Indian blood, and from what I know, Choctaw Indians were enslaving black people, and they were treating them like shit. They started killing black people in massive numbers, and that's why when people talk about the Trail of Tears, people tend to forget that the Trail of Tears were that was actually a massive slave like a slave trafficking, I think it was like a slave trafficking, group of of American Indians holding black Americans captive, or black American slaves captive, to basically take advantage of them and kill them, and basically sell them off to other tribes for massive slave enslavement. So, this is for more domestic slave trade that all these big, American Indian tribes, took advantage of, like the Apache Indians and, the Iroquois and all these crazy ass tribes that thought, it was okay to do that. Like the Sioux tribe, there's plenty of tribes out there. I don't need to be listing every single one of them out there, but if you guys just do a simple Google search, did American Indians own black Americans as slaves, you could easily tell that they were the pioneers of slavery, of enslaving their own, but they were also disrespecting the lives and the agency of black American slaves. They were killing them, they were, basically using them for cannon fodder for wars, and they were raping and pillaging, their own. They were raping and pillaging, the women and children, and just constantly just destroying, men's lives, while they were trying to seek freedom and trying to seek justice out of their own, enslavement. You know what I'm saying? So, either way, that's pretty much what I have to say. I have nothing but a lot of respect and love for my American Indian genes that I carry. Minus, the status bullshit behind them. I'm always like against that, and I fight, like against that every day. And I'm proud of like my Black American genes as it is, but I will never sit here and coon for something that is not true, because it's not true. And a lot of people that are these racist, racial, ethnic, sympathizers, where they try to act like, how should I say? They try to act like race baiters to think that, they're gonna claim something, that they're not. But it's like, it's just mentally retarded. It's just like when people try to say like, Puerto Ricans were created by black people. The Tainos were black, blah blah blah. You have those idiots that will come out of their way and say, oh well, look at the Chinese people. They were black people, man. Black people, man. They were already, the creators of China. Just look at who those Chinese people were coming out of the ancient Chinese lands, Fangalang, Dangalang, it just never stops, But these people will constantly simp for the dumbest historical revisionist ideas to think that that's basically true, and it's really not true, because it's just like, people just basically talk out of their ass, and they think that they know everything about, the political world or the political history of certain tribes. But it's like, when you don't do the research and you just take certain little pieces that you want to throw to the wall to hope that it sticks, that doesn't make your argumentation any better. And on top of that, it makes you look more like a dumbass for people to want to basically have a bigger beef with you, and they want to vigilantly confront you about it. That's like black people trying to claim to say that they're British and Britain was created by black people, when clearly it wasn't, because you have like idiots out there that will say stupid shit like that. And it's like, when they don't back it up with any reputable facts or at least debatable research, where you could say, hey, look, well, this is like the fossil records that show when the land of Britain was created, it was technically black, because like these Aboriginal people that came into the United Kingdom were black. It just shows that, hey, maybe there could have been black people in Britain before Britain was actually white. But it's not true, because British people were naturally white coming into that land when they were hunter-gatherers, leading into medieval civilization, knights in shining armor of kings and queens. I don't know, but still, I will always think of a British person to be a white person before I even think of them to have any black roots, because British people will say, yeah, they have black people there, but guess what? Black people of the UK, they're always going to come out of their way to say, black people in the UK will view themselves as regular immigrants, or basically slaves, slave migrants that were brought in by slaves, or, they came in some form of, indentured servitude when the British Crown was, still operating in a very colonial dipshit manner. But still, after the British Crown got rid of that shit, in which, but the crazy thing, like, about British, slavery being ended was that the British government actually forced, quote unquote, the tax victims, or the people that got into, like, basically, let the people that were already operating, under the British, government, to be forced to be extorted for, taxes, or tax extortion, right? Those people were forced by the British government to basically pay off the debt to make people free from slavery, which, in my honest mindset, that does not make any sense of solutionizing or finding a solution to the table to get rid of slavery, because slavery was still being applied to the people that were already being forced to be extorted for taxes, for the, like, for the level of theft to basically, take advantage of, people's lives, and just basically trade one form of slavery to another form of slavery, which would be central banking, and making people enslaved for, for the wrong reasons of paying for something that shouldn't need to be paid for. Because it's like, I don't believe that to even be true, to even be beneficial, but you could easily tell by that, time frame when the British government did do that, the people of those lands, or the people of the, United Kingdom, they only came to that mutualized, like, agreement, because of the British governing authority at that time frame was, it was turning from, like, a monarchy to like a prime, to a prime, ministry, right, of, like, what British people call. But still, you could easily tell that the British, governing, like, authority has changed within, like, the past, I would say, at least, a couple thousand years, to be exact. But yeah, either way, like, I mean, in terms of my original point with, with, like, Black Americans, or I wouldn't even just say Black Americans, just African DNA being connected with, American Indian DNA, that's not true. The historical records will show to you that their DNA was completely different from Black African DNA, and, even if it was, then Black Africans should be able to prove how they're connected with, like, American Indian DNA, when, in all honest reality, like, they're not. They don't have any roots or lineage that shows any, relationship, for it. And I think it's pretty stupid that, they even take it to that level. But it's just, pretty dumb, because, either way, like, it just doesn't really show anything of any, certain proof of, like, having, the bloodline, to begin with. And, it's all outdated proof that people try to use. They try to say, oh, well, based on this such and such, religious scripture, it shows that these American Indian men are similar in DNA with, like, the Black African men of the ancient past, and blah blah blah. And it's just, like, very dumb. I mean, it doesn't show anything. It really just shows, like, a lot of, whataboutism, to say that American Indians had something, to be connected with, when it's not even accurate information. It's a lot of stupid information that's just being piled into some dumbass, fuckery, I would say. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, I don't really have that much to really say on it, but for those of you that want to just, understand more of, what, the history, all you got to do is just look up, the archaeology articles that, that, like, American Indians had, for their tribes, and, that'll give you more information of, like, who they are as a people, and what brought them together, and all these tribes, in America that were formed, and, other parts of, the Americas too, like the Central America, South America, all these tribes. There's millions of people, of thousands of tribes that differentiated in different bloodlines of who they were. But I mean, either way, it just clearly shows that, everyone was diverse in their own, you know, in their own culturalized bloodline. And I mean, that's just how I see it. I've never really been thinking of it to even be like that. But either way, it just really differs. I mean, at the end of the day, it's just really all about how you can view it to be, how should I say, like, how you can view it to even be something consistent in terms of, what people, believed in to be considered a certain ethnic tribe of its own. But um yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. I mean, I don't really have much to really say, but be sure to like, rate, comment, subscribe, and yeah, I'll see you guys later. So that's pretty much it. This is my video. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and yeah, I will see you guys soon. And be sure to like, rate, comment, subscribe. Peace, love, liberty, and happiness. And I am out. Bye.